Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in a minute here, letting people trickle in. All right, why don't we get started here? Good day, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Aaron DeYonker, and I'm here with Jill Bondesample and James Holloway, and we're excited to show you some latest features that came out in some recent releases. So today's webinar is geared towards the latest improvements we made to our authoring tool, in addition to a couple great features for our applications. While we're focusing on the authoring tool, we expect most of today's attendees to have some level of familiarity with it and content creation inside WorkLink. If you don't worry. We have lots of materials on Zendesk's site to help you get familiar with this powerful yet easy to use tool. If you have any questions, please ask those in the chat window, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar as time permits. So just to set some context here at Scope, our vision is to allow authors to create very powerful AR experiences and deliver those to folks to execute complex procedures, connect to experts to get their work done, and throughout the process, capturing data so we can analyze and optimize the end-to-end experience as well. Next slide, please. Supporting that vision is our WorkLink Create authoring tool, our backend data infrastructure and content management system, and our suite of end user applications which span across devices from handhelds as well as head-mounted displays. Next slide. Our vision on the product team, the current year has been on 3 major initiatives. First off is the digital thread, which is the connected digital representation of the full product lifecycle. This year, we're also introducing some great quizzing and scoring functionality to help learning and development teams integrate AR experiences into their training curriculum roadmaps. And we're going to have a webinar on that later in the year. And here at Scope, we are always listening to customer feedback, and we are always investing in ease of use for our authors and our end users. And that is the focus of the topics today. And I'm going to pass this over to Gilles.
All right. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Aaron. So I'm Gilles Bondesample, and I'm the product manager for our authoring software, Create. So today I'll be talking about some really exciting new features that we implemented recently in one of the recent versions. And yeah, what better way to do that than with a live demo? So I will move on to exiting this presentation and go to WorkLink Create. So yeah, just to show this is all live. I'm using now this turbofan engine. To some experienced authors on the call, this might be familiar from the onboarding sessions. So just for those who are not very familiar with Create yet at the moment, I'll just give a really short overview of what exactly makes Create such an easy authoring tool to begin with. So I'll just start from the top and move my way down to the bottom of Create and explain a bit about how the philosophy works of the software. So all the way on the top of the WorkLink Create, you can see you have sequences and steps. So these are the 2 top bars. As a sequence, to give an example, a sequence would be a sequence of events, for example, to complete a work instruction. So that could be completing a work instruction, and the amount of steps, or the steps in general, would be the steps that you would need to complete that work instruction. Of course, as an author, you have the flexibility to do a lot more with that system. So you can add and easily remove sequences or add steps, move them around, and so forth, but that is the initial intent of the software. So right below those 2 very important bars, you have the toolbar, which allows you to use a lot of tools to really optimize your project and work with it. One thing I would like to highlight is the view toolbar when you look at the UI preview in general. So when I click this button, you see the UI preview itself. And it also allows you to easily change the aspect ratio of the preview itself. So 16:9 is the aspect ratio that you usually have for configuring something for a full HD screen. So that would be, for example, 1080p. 4:3 would be the general aspect ratio of an iPad, if you can see that on my camera. And we also recently added 19.5:9, which is the aspect ratio for most modern smartphones, such as the latest iPhones and so forth. So moving forward from that particular toolbar, you can see we have an actually completely updated windowing system that allows you to tab and dock windows. So before moving into that, I'm just highlighting the bottom toolbar as well, which is the information toolbar that shows a lot of interesting information about the project. So when you last published, for example, when your last saves were, and the display units that you're using, or the time in the timeline editor that you're on. So that's all quite useful information about your project, as well as the health of your project. So to go a little bit deeper into the docking of Windows itself. So as you can see, I can easily switch between tabs. For those who know the older legacy system, I think this is a much wanted and really nice improvement to see. Just to give a really quick tip on that, you can also use the arrow keys on your keyboards to easily switch focus between the screens. So you can easily move around without even touching your mouse. I would also like to show you how to redock these windows. So for example, I just drag the AR trackers window. And when I move over other windows that are located and tabbed here, I actually get a widget as a preview. So when I move over this particular widget, you can actually see a nice preview in yellow of how this window will be docked when I release this button. And as an additional tip, you can also easily actually drop this AR trackers window between, in this case, the UI editor and the form editor. So when I move this here, it actually gets tabbed to those windows as well. So I can undock it completely. There's actually a lot of flexibility within doing this. So you may ask, yeah, this is all great, but I would like to save these workspaces and make sure that they are managed across sessions. So that's also a good news on that topic, because we implemented a system that allows exactly that. So before going into custom workspaces, I would like to highlight that we also have a couple of factory workspaces. So if I switch back to the default workspace, this is what you would see when you open Create for the first time as a first-time user. But there are also workspaces, for example, the timeline editing workspace, which allows you to focus, for example, on the timeline editor. So if I go to, for example, step 4, where I'm actually removing the front cone of this turbofan engine. So just to play this back, this is what it would look like. So when it's hitting the first time bar, you actually see the screws coming out of the turbofan. And imagine if you have a lot of different channels and complex animations, this kind of workspace would be very helpful to get your project done and work efficiently. So if I'm moving back to my default workspace, I'll show you how to create a custom one. So imagine in this scenario, I want to create multiple scene views. So you can easily do that by clicking the plus sign here. And I want to attach it to the side of this window. Maybe I want to add a third scene view here. So I'll attach it here to the bottom. Imagine I want to move my asset library here. Maybe my form editor attached to the timeline editor. So this is a completely new workspace that may be my new preference. So then I just move to Window, Workspace, and then Save Custom Workspace. So in this case, I'll call this Custom 1. So when I confirm this, you actually see under Workspace, I now have a Custom 1 workspace that I can address by Alt-Shift-7. So the default workspace is Alt-0. So just to show how the hotkeys can easily allow you to switch between these setups, I'm pressing now Alt-0, Alt-2, 3. So these are the factory workspaces, as well as a couple of workspaces that I created myself. So under Alt-6, I've made a specific workspace template to do template editing. So in this case, this is a workspace I preferred myself to create new templates if I choose to create one. But yeah, you can do basically anything with this system to your liking. So I'll switch back to the default workspace to show one final thing on this particular project, and that are the updates that we made to the UI editor. So if I move back to the first step in my scenario or in my project, in the first step, I just invite the user or the end user to explore and walk around the augmented reality experience. But imagine I want to create a specific branch here that goes to different sections of this project. I can simply change my templates, for example, to branch. And imagine I want to hide option 3 to 5. I can simply do that by clicking the eye icons and hiding them. And as I open the different options, and maybe also move around my timeline editor here so I have a bit more space to show that. I might want to do option 1 as linking to rotation, because that is what I have here on step 2, and I explain the end user how the turbofan engine rotates and which parts are used for that. And maybe as a second branch, I want to use the front cone step. So that would be linking to step 4, front cone. Maybe let's make this a bit more slick and change the icon to black, so the button to black. I can also, of course, choose any color I like and move it around, but I'll keep it nice and simple for now. And the last piece of the puzzle is to add a target. So in this case, for the rotation option, I want to link it to sequence 1, the step to rotate. And for my second button, I want to link it to sequence step 4, the front cone. So also you have a nice preview now here that shows you what the target is and what sequence and step it comes from. So you can easily trace back your steps. And to show you how that works, when I simulate this, go to step 1, I click on rotation, it also automatically goes to step 2, rotate. So if I go back to step 1, and I click front cone, it goes to step 4, where you actually see the animation of how the front cone is removed. So this is something that was possible before, but we made it a lot easier to work with, and the user interface has improved quite a bit, I think, since the past versions. So that's also quite some good news. Then aside from that, I would like to highlight one other best practice, and that is in regards to object tracking. So I'm going to move to another project here where I have my speaker here. So I have it here as well in front of me. So this is a simple speaker, but actually you can use any other object, of course, to your liking where you have cat data for. And the basic intent of doing augmented reality on real life objects would be, for example, to look through objects, show components that you can't see in real life. And the challenge there usually is that you want to align the virtual content to your real life object. So I will just show you how easy that can be. But before I do that, I'll just show you quickly how I built up this project. So it's showing a look through of how the tweeter works for this particular speaker. After that, you have some component overview and an animation that shows you a comparison of the original. So the original real life object would be here, and then the new object will be there. So you can really compare my 3D content to the real deal. So to create an object tracker, you can simply go to the content placement step. And I would also like to highlight here that we much improved our tooltip system, and we will continue to do so as well for future versions, of course, also based thanks to your feedback. In this case, you can see that the content placement step has also the tooltip that explains what it is with a link to more info on our user base, which is our user documentation on Zendesk. But to show you how easy it's done, now I finally get to it. I can go to the content placement step and simply select objects that I want to use for object tracking. So I would also always recommend to use parts that are clearly in view for the end user and are not obscured by other parts, as well as having good lighting conditions that can always help. So after the selection is done, you can simply right-click and create tracker from selection. And what that exactly does is it creates an AR tracker in the AR trackers window. So to keep it simple for the end user, I'll just delete the original surface tracker so that there is only one tracker within this project. So when I select this particular object tracker, I can go to my object properties and actually see how that is set up. One thing I would like to change now before I publish this project is to change the device pose preview. So also to explain what that is it is the angle to which the end user will look at the object when they're using this experience. And that angle will actually define how the object will be locked in real life. I'll also make that a little bit more clear by showing a video of how the end user experience works. But I'll start with editing the pose. So a good angle in this case would be a 3/4 front view. So something like this. And I need to make sure that this view is also within the yellow dotted line, which is also the aspect ratio that I showed earlier in the UI preview. So currently it is set to 16:9, which is a 1080p ratio. So I'll apply this and you have a nice preview of what it will look like. And as a final part, I would like to highlight some of these advanced settings that you see here below. As this is early adopters technology, some of these terminology is not really straightforward to understand. So that is also a big reason why we made big improvements to our tooltip system and gave really practical examples of what these values exactly mean, as well as a link to our user base documentation as well that explains you how to use debug mode on the app side. So as an author, I would also recommend to use this debug mode to make sure that you're using best practices and that your object tracking project is set up right. But in any case, I would always recommend to use the default settings because these are really great for generic conditions with normal lighting and normal setup. These should actually always work great, and you can reset to them by clicking this reset button. So to finish that off, you would just simply need to publish that project. As I want to stay in this webinar and not move to my living room, I will show you a pre-recorded video, but I promise I recorded that today. So just to show you how that looks like, full screen it so you can see a little bit better. So when the end user opens this scenario, they will get an invitation to match the outline to the object. So the line that you see here is actually the init pose that we defined earlier. And you can see as soon as the WorkLink app recognizes the object and it's close enough to that line model that was defined, it tells the end user that the object is found with a confirmation and the invitation to tap the screen to confirm the placement. So in this case, I'm just looking around to see if everything matches correctly, tapping the screen to make sure it's matched. And I'm toggling through the experience that I created within WorkLink Create. So this is also showing how the object looks side by side, also showing how much visual quality you can get within Create. So that basically concludes this particular part of object tracking. And before I hand over to our next speaker, I would just like to highlight that you can always review these type of videos on our YouTube page. So when you go to the Scope AR YouTube page, there are playlists located in there. And one thing I would recommend, especially for early users, is to watch the Learn Create playlist. So when you look in into that playlist, you actually see a large variety of videos. And we also continuously add videos to these as we add new features to Create with practical examples. So you can really see how you could solve particular problems for your projects. So with that, I would like to hand over to my colleague, James Holloway, who's our product manager for the app and the CMS side of things, to also show you some really great updates that we made recently to our WorkLink suite.
Thanks, Jill. That was great. The product manager for the end user applications across platforms as well as the CMS. So I wanted to highlight some great new features that we've added to surface mode placement. So this is actually included in the recent update that we did earlier this month on iOS and Android. One of the problems that we wanted to solve here is that we weren't providing enough guidance and feedback to end users when they're placing content in surface mode. So let's go ahead and play the video. This was pre-recorded yesterday in my office. So you can see immediately it found a surface and it's showing the 3D content hologram. And as I move around, it's locating other valid surfaces. And when it's looking for valid surfaces, you see the point cloud. So it's already found these surfaces pretty quickly. So as I move around, it's just, moving the object, centering that on the flat surfaces. And at any point, the user can tap on the screen and confirm that placement and lock it in place. So yeah, I think that's good. We can move on to the next feature. So the next improvement we made. So once you place that content in surface mode, so let's let Gilles get that queued up here. You have the ability to rotate and scale that object. So without having to move around. So one of the problems that we had with surface mode placement content is if you happen to place it up against the wall and you need to see something behind it, or maybe you want to look at closer detail and scale that up. So at any point after the content's placed, you should be able to rotate in 360 degrees. And at any point you can tap on the indicator at the very top to reset that back to 0. And you can easily pinch and zoom to zoom in and look at the fine detail of your model. This would be particularly useful in training or quizzing when you want to really look at everything in close up. So you can get this shows that you can get really close up and zoom all the way in. Yeah, so that's pretty cool if you ever have that need. So without having to switch over to interactive mode and move the camera around and zoom in, you could do that now in surface mode. So that pretty much sums it up. I'll hand it over to Aaron to close it out. Thank you.
Thanks, James, and thanks, Gilles. Some very exciting stuff. And of course, this was all based on feedback from our customers. So really want to thank everybody for sharing their input to help drive improvements to our overall product suite here. We have time for questions now, a few more minutes, and feel free to enter those into the question box at the bottom of your screen. We have a couple here. One is, when is all this functionality available? Just want to emphasize that this is stuff that has already been released, is released in the past couple months, and you have access to that now. Another question is, what about for on-prem releases? All of this functionality is available in on-prem releases. Those are a little bit staggered from our cloud release, and we work very closely with your deployment teams to get that out and in your hands. But I know that's in process for a lot of you at the moment. Any other questions here? With the new UI in Create, does that support multi-monitor use? Great question. We focused on the windowing. Well, Gilles, do you want to take that?
Yeah, of course. So we definitely heard that request as well in the past. So this is definitely something that's on the roadmap. And we actually did some experimentation on this particular part of the solution already. We decided not to release it yet for stability reasons, to be completely transparent about it. So we're actively developing here as well to make sure that we can get this stabilized, because the communication between multiple Chrome tabs, for example, or Edge tabs can be problematic. So we just want to make sure that every single part of that communication doesn't throw any errors. But what I can recommend for now is that actually try this myself. I have multiple monitors set up myself here. I have actually 3 screens next to each other. What I did is I created a workspace template that actually splits all of my scene views to the left and all of my windows to the right. So I can drag my Chrome tab to over to Windows with everything neatly organized across the two. So this is, of course, not yet true multi-monitor support, but it is a workaround that you could use for now.
Interesting. Next question is here, does Scope have a Unity SDK? Gilles, I'll pass that one over to you. Yeah.
So a Unity SDK, could you maybe give a bit more explanation of actually to be?
I'm imagining using Unity to extend functionality.
Yeah. What my follow-up question with that for me would be is what exact features would you like to target with Unity? Because in theory anything is possible, We don't have a Unity SDK right now for WorkLink Create, but I would be interested in what type of features and functionalities and the user story behind it that you would like to achieve, because there is a very big possibility that we can implement the features that you would like to see.
Great.
All right, yeah, an offline conversation sounds good. Thanks, Christopher.
Another question is, what's next on the roadmap? So like I mentioned before, we have some very, very cool quizzing and scoring functionality that's in the works right now. And folks can expect a webinar on that in the next couple months. And James will be the highlight of the show there. Again, that's been something that's been in demand from a lot of our customers that are focused on training use cases as it comes to overall AR experiences and how that fits in their overall learning and development roadmaps. And I see we are out of time here. So if we didn't get to your questions, we will follow up and answer those. And we really appreciate everybody joining us today. And thank you to Gilles and to James for putting together some really cool content here. And looking forward to seeing you at the next webinar. All right.